Why, hello there, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. My name is Mr. DB333, and welcome back to Hearts of Iron 4000 Week Reich as the United States of Brazil. Now, last time we joined each other in Brazil, well, we had our elections, and they went very, very well. We won by a pretty solid margin, and we now have 28 seats in the Senado, which is very, very impressive. But we had a bit of a hiccup. Our vice presidential candidate, Mr. Natel, did not win his nomination as well, and a lot did. So we are currently going to have to sit back and see how that ends up playing out. But before we hop in any further, let's go ahead and take a look at some more of Brazil. Starting off with Rhodonia. The past decades, Bolivia's rubber industry was hamstrung by a long stretch of unnavigable rapids, which prevented the shipment of latex down the Amazon. To solve this conundrum, Bolivia offered the Acre territory of Brazil agreed to fund a railroad which bypassed the rapids. The treaty was soon signed in 1903, and work commenced soon after. Porto Velho was established as its end to move latex from train cars onto cargo ships, and until recently, this trade represented virtually all of Roraimi's economy. But with the recent discovery of large tin deposits and rapidly rising demand for wood and beef, the territory is rapidly diversifying, and Rio Velho is diversifying in tandem. This is not without cost, as indigenous communities, which had remained intact since before the voyages of Columbus, now find themselves increasingly threatened by Brazilian settlers and their diseases. Well, that reminds me. We also have the cultures here. The majority in most of these places has been indigenous Brazilians. Seems the same for Para. When the first Portuguese settlers arrived in Belém, they did not realize the Amazon River behind them was the world's largest, but they were well aware of the unique spices that natives traded down its banks. It sought to assert themselves as gatekeepers of these niche goods with the outside world. In the late 19th century, the rulers of Belém became the gatekeeper of something much more valuable: rubber. City officials soon lived like kings, with Belém becoming rich enough to afford luxuries equaling those of Paris and Berlin, even as the poorest state surrounding it remained the poorest in the country. The rubber boom did not last, however, and while many ostentatious monuments to the city's wealth still stand, alongside them are expansive slums, as hundreds of thousands of people now look to the city for work. Gotta love that contrast. Finally, we have Amapa. Despite its proximity to the coast, Macapa is one of Brazil's most isolated cities, connected to the outside world only by ferry service to Belém and until recently bereft of industry. While Rio and Sao Paulo were being built into modern metropolises, residents of Macapa still lacked running water. But since an intensive development effort so that the city could host an airbase in the Second World War, Macapa's fortunes have shifted. The recent discovery of manganese deposits in Amapa has promoted a flurry of private investment centered in the territory's capital, pulling in thousands of mainly Pyrenees residents every year. With a solid economic base, along with increased military importance in light of tensions over nearby Cayenne, perhaps Macapa's air of isolation is near its end. We'll have to wait and find out. But we will not wait any longer in getting this stuff started. Started my timer, and now we begin. Azad him triumphant in the Civil War. Really? Huh. Last I looked over, I thought India was winning. That's interesting. In retrospect, Goulart should have known better. He was always the riskier option for president. God knows how many hundreds of people would love to put a bullet in his heart for simply wanting to do right for the people. So he couldn't objectively blame Brazilians for not voting on a person that almost caused democracy to die under the tyrants that always threatened the country. Emotionally, however, he was a wreck, and that's how he found himself, half a bottle of pinga in his hand, half-spent pack of cigarettes in his pocket, and the television playing a game of soccer that he wasn't sure he was fully paying attention to. His face felt wet, warm, painful from the tears, disappointment and sorrow boiling in him for letting the people down, Brazil down, Vargas down. Sure, it could have been much worse, but the fact that this happened because of him can't help but haunt him, like a specter gripping his heart tighter and tighter until it... He didn't realize, but the grip on his body wasn't his failures, but Maria Teresa, pulling his head on his shoulder, silently giving company to him in his bleeding, emotional heart. He knew there would be other chances, other opportunities, other venues, to put his dream of fair Brazil to the nation. He wasn't alone, he had friends, family, a loving wife, and he was on the soil of the country he loved so much. He would be fine. Resultado final. Botafogo 2, Flamengo 0. God fucking damn it! Lacerda threw the phone on the wall, getting up and kicking the chair of gusto as if it represented the idiotic masses that couldn't see what he did for Brazil. What he could have done for the country if they would just give him a chance. Months wouldn't be enough, wouldn't ever be enough to make sure Brazil, in all of its pristine, shining glory, could stand to be the leader. Could stand as the leader South America was always meant to be. All they needed was to vote for the right candidate, and they didn't. For a fleeting moment, thoughts of trying another 55 went through his head. Democracy sometimes simply needed a nudge in the right direction, and he knew that better than most. But that moment all but died as he thought further and saw the benefits. If, however, whoever got the job in the Planalto did a lousy job, he could do what he's always done best and use propaganda to attack them. This time with experience as a presidential candidate to back him up. He could use the little time he got as a platform of what he could do and show the people what his opponent was doing wrong. However, this required that the people would just bloody vote right the next time. If it was Vargas' little spawn or his accursed protege, maybe he would consider another 55, but as it stands, it would be too little gain over the massive risk. Democracy in Brazil wasn't going anywhere anymore, and he would have his chance. He waited many years. He can wait 4 more. Have your seat. Keep it warmed up for me next time. How are we doing? We're doing okay there. Alright, we're making some nice money. Our nepotism is horrible right now. I'm gonna get a new general signed. Sue Machado Lopez. Get him in there. We'd pay for more overtime for workers, but I think we'll sit back. So, you're the one who defeated Natal. President-elect Ademar beamed at his new vice president. Edna Lott merely offered her hand with regal manners. Shaking her hand, Ademar observed this woman, who had, against all odds, climbed to the vice presidency. In history's odd, sardonic sense of humor, where her father had a right-wing vice president opposed to his presidency, Edna Lott now seemed poised to stand on the president's left. A rising star of the BTB, uncomfortable a replacement to Vice President Natal's pliable ways. Ademar smiled further. You have a charisma your father always lacked, Senora Lott. And you've got the confidence populism this country's conservatives never could attain. I do not wish to play games with you, Mr. President. You make a mockery of poor Brazilians' issues. You give them trinkets where deep reforms are required. I fully intend to use my office to monitor your work. Assuming your claims of seeking to help poor workers are total rubbish, we may find ground for cooperation. Until then, you must forgive me for not being eager to share an office with you, Mr. President. I would not begrudge you a similar irritation. Ademar refrained from smiling, lest he aggravate his new vice president any further. She had her father's stubborn honesty, enhanced by a woman's wiles. The cohabitation would be uncomfortable, yet how much more entertaining? I asked the Lord to keep my enemies as close as possible. Well, there we go. This ought to be interesting, at least, I think. That's not gonna be good. That, I'm also not sure if it's good or not. It's... It had been months since Darrell Alves had kindly asked Nolasco to do something to PSG. To his disappointment, the Admiral continued to stick his head in the stand and do nothing. Now it's time for Alves and his boys to deal with the issues as he directed Hajunkos through his plan to the confines of the barn. Alright, so I think by now you are all familiar with the rabble-rouser Justin Gauthier, Supreme Leader of PSG. The men dutifully nodded. He's an agent anarchy, a man who does not respect Brazil in the slightest. We're doing her a favor by assassinating him. If not for that, think of your families starving after your jobs are stolen by these fanatics when they nationalize my land to sate your own greed. Some were taken aback upon hearing the mention of murder, if only for a moment. Most were not. A little birdie told me Gauthier is planning a trip to the countryside, far away from prying eyes, our territory. From there, we can shoot him dead. It doesn't matter where he is, because I'm certain that most in Brasilia will thank us for this. Despite the assurances, Alves could sense some lingering apprehension. We all know the apathy of the local police, but to deter them further, I've budgeted hush money for this operation. Once this has taken place, the rest of Brazil will see you as patriots. Now relax, for we will lie in wait until we can take our retribution. The barn turned silent once more, as the discussion would have significant ramifications for Brazil, only not the kind the men in the barn had planned. Blood moves the wheel of history. Oh boy. I am curious to see how this goes out. Well, how this turns out. Do we want to get working on anti-air? I'm not sure if we do. Get working on... I don't even think we have special forces, but I don't know what else to do. In a country where political life seems the impossible turn mundane, the mundane tinge of absurd, comedy had, as of late, had a boom. In the comedy club scenes of big cities like Rio, up-and-coming comedians gathered on designated nights to try out their sketches in front of other comedians, as well as average citizens. Recent political troubles had been a boon for aspiring comics. Lots attack eternity, Quadros' grandiloquent alcoholism, J.K. and Lacerda's arrogant scheming. All of them mocked mercilessly. None so much, however, as now President Ademar, with his briefcase full of self-admittedly stolen money, his populace in ersatz pious sayings. Ademar de Barros had provided fodder to countless aspiring humorists. Not everyone was equally enthralled with the rash of Ademar imitators. Bruno sighed, sitting in the back of a club of friend. See? Everyone's Ademar now. He's too easy to mock. He's killed comedy. His friend shrugged. Everyone will be Ademar in politics, too. Corrupt and populist. Why not get used to it here? Comedy used to give us something to escape daily life, not repeat it. We've elected a clown president. What do you expect? I'm saving that for my own purposes. That's funny to me. Probably Hindustan. Look at that. Huh. Interesting indeed. It was a prison day in Brasilia, and Henrique Teixeira Lot was pleased that he was able to use his good day to meet with someone who was neither an opponent of his, nor someone who had just messed up, nor indeed someone who out to see what they could get from him. Quite the contrary, it was his beloved daughter, Edna, who had just been elected to high office in the aftermath of a recent election. How are things going then, Edna? Well, pretty good, Dad. I've been getting used to the way things work. Django's shown me the ropes. I've been in touch with Tancredo here and there. Leonel has been pretty helpful, too, even if he's a bit radical for my tastes. Ah, well, you'll You'll disagree with them once in a while, and there will even be conflicts. But whatever you do, you need to stay strong and stick to your principles. I understand, Dad. Good. One more thing. If there's anything I can do to help you, just ask. I will see to it. Edna smiled and embraced her father. Thank you, Dad. Top secret for the palace, office of Admiral Angelo Nolasco de Almeida. Cayenne, scenes of political unrest. Yesterday, the leader of Guinea's Socialist Party, Justin Cayete, was the subject of an attempted assassination. Reports suggest he was attacked in a friend's house during a trip to the countryside, which was invaded by multiple unidentified suspects who shot at Cayete before burning down the house. Fortunately for him, Cayete was saved by his personal guards from the blaze and is currently in stable condition, resting in hospital. Currently, most suspect that the Yagundos in the employ of farmer Daryl Alves were responsible. However, local police have proven surprisingly silent on the matter, only issuing a public statement that they are still investigating the case. Orange County suggests that the police force was paid off by numerous farmers not to investigate the case, meaning their investigation will soon turn into a dead end. The more pressing matters, the riots erupting from this attempted assassination as previously political moderates have become radicalized towards the cause of independence. Worryingly, it appears that their call for referendum on the matter of independence is increasingly gaining traction in the OAS as the popularity of the PSG has skyrocketed. Expect to hear further from U.S. regarding your administration's conduct in its future. Army Progresso. After the report, Nolasco buried his head into his hands. Oh boy. Nice. Got another month to get to the next milestone. Southeast is pretty heavily industrialized at this rate. Very nice. What do we want to do next? Do some industrialization. Let's get all of this up to 45 now. Which isn't going to take too long now, I think. That's our legacy. Still forgettable right now, but we'll get there, probably. Well, keep stashing our slush fund. Senor Odebrecht, said a construction supervisor, barely an adult, hard hat on his head and a clipboard in hand. There's some men down the hill. They say there's some papers you need to sign. Something about next month's funding, poorly disguising how his worry. He pointed at the scaffolding filled remains of Asuncion below, where a black limousine had parked, flanked by two suit-filled escorting vehicles. Sorry, I'm getting a ton of messages right now. Nothing important. Just when I was starting to enjoy the view, he opened his wallet. Here, hand him a couple thousand and sign everything for me. Tell them they'll get a call from Basile soon enough. The young man's eyes widened as Odebrecht pressed the bills into his hands. Yes, sir, right away, he sputtered before beginning his sprint. First towards, then down the street, bobbing and weaving between the ever-growing assortment of overladen truck beds and freshly purchased machinery. Tell them to stop blocking traffic. I'm rebuilding a capital on deadline. Can they not save their complaints for some secretary? He let his hands hit his sides and his fingers unfurl as the convoy began to depart. The Paraguayan returned to his site, not knowing with whom he had spoken to and whom he had bribed. The movers and shakers of the Brazilian economy would maintain their blessings, and the rebirth of the mother of cities would maintain its pace. Fat trimmed, edges sanded, and surface polished, Asuncion would be worthy of the world's gaze once more. They just had to make sure that the made in Brazil sticker blended in. Look at that. 3 million to our slush fund. Magnifico. Oh, there goes. Indonesia stuff. Confirming that. Socialism in feudal country, huh? If you say so. Odilio was in the front of the podium. On his front were the 500 cadets of the Academia Militar de das Aguilas Negras on their perfect white uniforms, awaiting for him to say. He still had memories from 40 years before, when he was as young watching Marshal Setembrino de Carvalho retire. He didn't expect so much time to fly by. I have fought for my country through all the battlefields possible. As a cadet against the old republic, as an officer against the Nazis in Britain, as a Brazilian against the corrupt politicians that pollute our country, as a father against the socialists who corrupted our youth with their insane doctrines. And a lesson I learned and still carry with myself is that our country will always be persecuted by enemies from the outside and the inside, and thus my retirement might be the end of my fight, but it is the beginning of yours. Massive applause started throughout the whole room. Odilio could see the pride and respect on the eyes of everyone in the room. True Brazilians, respectful Brazilians just like him. People who would pave the way for the country in the future and continue his mission. The good fight for their homes, the home of their ancestors and the home of their children. Soon he wouldn't be on Earth anymore, but his soul would continue alive through every single man on the run. And after finishing his speech, Odilio wept, for his mission was over. Well, let's get someone else in there. I think it was this guy who replaced him, Zhao. Let's get Zhao in there. Sao Paulo. He'd missed the place. Ademar had kept the local office throughout his presidential race. Now that the prize was him, however, it was time to close shop and move to Brasilia. The safe had been moved, the money partially cycled through a few fronts before accompanying him to the capital. Files of blackmail and intel had been read by him. Facility useful stuff would be kept safe in a safe house in the city. The rest had been burned. There was not much more to clean or move in the office. It kept it mostly Spartan. As a front-facing area, bringing in dirty laundry wouldn't have not been helpful. Ademar moved to the window. He'd missed Sao Paulo. From time to time, the wind brought over, if not the feel of Vienna's ocean, then a certain idea of a sea. Infinitely better than Brasilia's stuffy continental atmosphere. No use dilly-dallying. Ademar picked up his briefcase, placed his chair under the desk, and left the room. To Brasilia. Let's hold some competency tests. And Wonderbar sat at their desk in the presidential office. Oh, credit rating improved. Wonderful. The Minister of Finance sat across from him. They'd hardly had time to move into their new office and recover from the campaigning of the presidential election, with documents, bits of furniture, and even personal effects of both the incoming and outgoing governments laid across the office. They'd had a note come through the Ministry of Finance's Economic Development Office regarding last year's economic goals. Ambitious? Exceedingly, but regardless of whether they managed to meet them or not, previous administrations have laid down the gauntlet in that respect, and the voters will not accept failure. In which case, we must ensure our success. So I'm guessing hop in the federal GUI. Looks like they want us to get a 64.8 billion. Cut down on inflation a bit more. Well, I don't know if we'll be able to do much on inflation. Growth should be a little easier. I'll up some of the spending a little bit. In the meanwhile, I don't want the deficit to be too rough. What a great fucking day, said General Figueredo, arriving in his office. Mathilda, I cannot believe that I'm going to become a general. Figueredo's secretary kept typing his promotion speech, making him slam his hand on the table. Ah, yes, sorry. Congratulations, General. You showed them, didn't you? Yes. Those motherfuckers who supported that piece of shit mummy now lost their ground. Denise won't be missed. That fucker is driving us against the big brother. With him gone, I can now take over. Mathilda continued to type her speech, though she was cautious to prevent another outburst of anger. Figueredo was not a man to be challenged. The news of Adelio Denise's retirement had been music to his ears, as Denise had always been neutral on America. Figueredo could barely wait to give a smug smile to the ceremony. What a long week this wait was going to be. These years in America taught me a lot, Mathilda. I think that despite being born in this shithole, I am a true American, right? This time, spent at the School of the Americas, has turned me into a true general, not the disgrace we have in Brazil, right? Mathilda was finishing the speech in her line time. Figueredo slammed his hand on the table again. Alright, let's increase their influence. Well, joke's on them, because the Progressistas still have more power. Francisca could finally relax. Christmas had not been kind to poor shopping clerks like her. However, the workday was thankfully over. Returning to her tiny two-room apartment in Gamboa, she found one of her kids asleep on the sofa, still in her uniform. The TV still on. Glancing outside, she saw a Guanabara Bay bathed in sunset gold, softly whispering to her, "Take a moment for yourself. Try finishing that depressing novel of yours." Lying on a green pattern mat, she picked up a wrinkled paperback. Vidas Secas, the cover read. She frowned. No matter how much she read, the story just didn't connect with her. Sure, she could relate a little. Finding a source of income when food and rent doubled and cost every month was hell. That seems so long ago now. Prices still rose, but her savings kept pace. Her children got the education they needed. Her daughters had begun high school, and her son studied physics. They even had a fancy Guangdong television. Heavy rains are coming to Rio, the machine exclaimed through static. Barely half a year old, Rede Globo was experimenting with its programming. Hoping audiences liked the new weather segment, they tried to keep the tone light. New Year's looking to be quite wet. But trust me, soon you can don your swimsuits and enjoy some cocktails on the beach. Barely paying attention to the news, the book slowly slipped from her fingers as her eyelids grew heavy. Its story had been talking about droughts, but the sun hadn't been as merciless or cruel lately. Cold December air softened as it gradually set beyond the mountains. There was still time before the others could come home. Dinner could wait. What harm could a quick siesta do? The nights covered the earth in shock. Uh-oh. The woodman says a storm's coming, but I think he's trying to keep the beach to himself, or so the refrain often went the night the storm came. Jokes about the weather were bandied like beach balls, a trendy toy from American movies. It drizzled at times, but nothing a coat or umbrella couldn't handle. The bay chuckled along with them, biding its time. Despite dreary sights and the fact New Year's Eve was last night, everyone stayed festive. Fireworks could barely be seen through the clouds, but the Guangdong radios kept Rio alive. Some savored Ian Callahan's catching United's defense flat-footed, bringing Liverpool a 2-1 victory. Others sang Sai 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 along Trem da Sonza for the millionth time, somehow never getting tired of it. The rest mindlessly consumed details of the presidential inauguration's evening reception and whatever fancy wine the corrupt idiot had. Suddenly, the sky thundered, drowning out all the sports, samba, and gossip. Rain poured. Guanabara Bay crashed for seaside fiestas. No worries, just move higher. Lacerda's seawall will hold water back. It didn't. Waves wash over, sweeping cars away like toys, wreaking havoc on businesses. The city's heartbeat continued from high ground, many sheltering the labyrinthine favelas. Sure, they were crowded, and many had to move there when Lacerda gentrified them out of their old homes, but it kept them out of a flood. However, the storm, refusing to give up, had one last dirty trick. The sea didn't just rise, the land sank. Flimsy villas built on top of each other, full of people, fell like dominoes as the soil compacted a few inches. Drunk on champagne, the government was too busy asking the new president where he bought his suit before realizing what was happening. Those who survived the falling and crashing were dragged into the icy depths of the bay, never to see their city again. 320 dead, hundreds more injured, thousands displaced. Ooh, that's not good. I don't like that. Today was Ademar de Barros's hour. At last, thanks be to God and his mother, Ademar was free to practice his unique and effective system of governance for his betterment and that of the people who support him, not to mention that of the Republicans' people. But before he had to be sworn in and made a speech, and he went about it with a plume, or so he thought. Everyone else on the other hand saw an eccentric, almost nonsensical speech that went from religious traditional invective to Brazola-style left-wing rhetoric and populism in 2 sentences flat. As his rhetoric swung like a pendulum, he took out a Cuban cigar and began to smoke it. The PFC sycophants continued to applaud as he spoke, but even they could not hide their confusion. In Olinda, the newly appointed Archbishop, Elder Camara, resisted your child to lose his mind, laughing or flying to a rage as the nearly incoherent speech wore on. In Sao Borja, on the other hand, Getulio Vargas looked more and more bemused as the more came out of Ademar's mouth. His son Getulio, sitting next to him, merely shook his head in amusement. Next to Ademar, his vice president, Edna Dufles Lot of the PTB, daughter to the previous president, was directing a funny look at him, not even bothering to disguise her confusion. A journalist observed this and then looked at a friend of his who worked for one of Carlos Lacerda's newspapers. His mouth worked before he was finally able to ask, "Is history repeating itself?" Well, here we go once again. This guy's the same, I think. This guy's the same, this guy's the same. The only new person here is Senora Lot. Born in 1919, Edna Lot's personality can be explained by the words of Sebastian Neri. Sweet and charismatic, enchanting with her words and her charm. Coming from a family strong military tradition, Edna became influential in conservative and progressive women's movements for her work during Lot's presidency, making her a natural Big Ten female candidate. In terms of ideals, Edna is a non-compromising supporter of democracy, favorable to civilian supremacy over the army, and a supporter of female participation in politics. If there's anything Edna Lot is known for, however, it's her unquestionable inability to take an insult sitting down. Well, there we go. Ooh. Looks like we have a new GUI as well. History does not repeat itself, but it does rhyme. In Brasilia, the Palácio do Planalto is a shattered mirror of the previous government. Vice President Edna Lot represents her father's administrative struggle, this time against President Ademar de Barros. Both are aware of the dangers of divided executive. Ademar has 2 options. Either he can work with Edna, turning her into an unlikely ally, or he can destroy her. He may find the daughter a more formidable opponent than her father. Interesting. President Ademar and Vice President Lot pace around Brazil, following paths well trodden by the previous administrations. As with the Lot governments, decisions that the administration makes will shift the balance of power and strengthen the strength of a relationship, will affect how the government approaches a potential crisis. Only time will tell whether it will repeat the mistakes of the past or make new mistakes of its own. Interesting. Well, the relationship is tense off the bat. Let's greet some foreign dignitaries together. Let's try not having so immediately tense. We have more influence, but again, let's try to leave things off on a nice note. Real quick, I want to check the GUI. See how this. Oh, that is the GUI. I do want to check this. So electoral speaking probably better work for the UDN or the PTB. Then again, I don't know. have a healthcare bill. Interesting. Well, we have a healthcare bill that'll pop up. Interesting. Okay, we got some interesting options going here. Gotta keep moving. Looks like paternity stuff. Okay. Infrastructure stuff, this looks like, as well as some foreign policy stuff. Got some dreams. No Man Left Behind. Is this foreign policy stuff? Maybe. And then military stuff over here. Okay. So this is going to be the nuclear stuff, it looks like. Interesting. Okay. Well, seems like a fun tree. Let's get working on the Ademar presidency. The Lord be praised we've made it. The presidency is Ademar's. Some comrades were lost through the perils of electoral politics. Vice President candidate and a lot had defeated President Ademar's friend, an associate Lotto Natel. Cohabitation with a moralistic left-wing vice president is likely to restrict President Ademar's ambition. That said, it's not yet time to strike. While we wait for Edna Lot's guard to drop down, the president has an ambitious plan to prove his abilities to the voting public. Drawing from his medical training as well as his time in Sao Paulo politics, Ademar has ample experience with Brazil's dysfunctional medical system. Former President Lot, busy with his lobsters, agrarian reforms in South Africa, has failed to build on the work done by Kubitschek. The public system is thus vastly underfunded and failing to meet demand. Our reforms will turn this around. We'll focus our attention on the nation's health to prove that Ademar does not only steal, he also does. As the Brazilian elections of '65 come to an end, Ademar de Barros enters the Palácio do Planalto in Brasilia as the new leader of the new president of Brazil. Ademar won office as the leader of a linchpin of populist PSP, which seems to have no policies aside from what he dictates. When he was asked a common Brazilian to describe de Barros, the first thing many of them would come up with is corrupt. Yet Ademar is also known for his competence. He leaves behind a trail of deals that benefit those who need it, while at the same time lining his pockets with those of his supporters. This is where his nickname, Senor Ruba Mas Faiz, Mr. Steals But Delivers, comes from. Most observers are of the mind that Brazil is in for a wild ride. Welfare bills are already being drafted, and corruption is certain to grow by leaps and bounds during the Ademar presidency. Time to steal and deliver. Meanwhile, we're stuffing our slush fund. It had taken hours of driving and then hours of marching for João Amazonas to reach his destination. Flies and insects buzzed all around him. It was almost constantly raining. The politicians were corrupt, and there was little to no infrastructure. In other words, it would be the perfect starting place for a revolution. No one would ask any questions about why Amazonas was building here. The thick forest canopy meant that they were protected from aircraft. He could get used to the flies. He stood back and watched a number of his comrades get to work, lifting and transporting boxes, cleaning the weaponry, and ensuring the tents were set up. It had taken them weeks of traveling and searching to pinpoint this very location, but when they had found it, they realized it was perfect. Too long he had been in the cities, arguing pointlessly with revisionists on minor policy and dealing with schisms in the communist movement due to blind faith in past leaders' methods. How could all those fools not see the past leaders of the movement had all failed because they were not committed enough? They'd compromised too much. Prestes, the revisionist traitor, was the biggest opponent of them all. He'd been fooled by the social fascism of Vargas and the PTB, despite fighting against Vargas in the 35 Revolution. That accursed revolution, whose consequences saw his wife Olga be deported to Germany and caused her to face almost certain death in the slave mines. Amazonas spot out on the floor, thinking about this. Once he'd believed in Prestes, but there was an old saying, never meet your heroes, and Amazonas certainly regretted meeting him. Amazonas went back to thinking about the eventual aims of the camp. He planned for a revolution that started in the countryside and with the support of the peasantry would be quick to spread to cities. Of course, the revolution would not be built overnight. They need more arms, more money, more personnel, more everything, really. But he and his comrades were committed. Revolutions had succeeded in the past despite dire circumstances. In Brazil, it would succeed as well. No longer would Brazil be oppressed. No, Brazil would soon truly be free. Araguaia will be our Petrograd. Interesting place for your Petrograd. I can even find where it is. I'm gonna go ahead. Let's work on field hospitals. A vision of someone in black robes shook and became blurry, like in a TV with its antenna falling off, then gave way to the yellow face of Nade. Get up, sir. This is grave news. Mumbling and still someone talked away to Ademar's escort in a stateroom that had the looks of being converted into a crisis response center. A stiff coffee was handed to him by Nautel, his chief of staff, while Manjas Barreto's hands shaking, poured the president a glass of water to follow. Cruel and Cunha stood vigil, and a lot was absent, not having been informed. No wonder the poor bastard's shuddering. And Ademar thought as Ernesto Geisel walked into the room, the weight of his post is making itself felt. God, I'm so afraid. His thoughts were cut off by Geisel turning on the radio. This is Radio Verde Oliva. We transmit the following civilian reports from Guanabara. Flash floods have been confirmed throughout the state, resulting in mass landslides. Hundreds are confirmed dead, thousands are missing, and displacements are in the tens of thousands. The room fell silent as the enormity of what had happened sank in, but Ademar felt a realization come over him. Not only was helping its duty, he could use this to prove his own legitimacy. Discredit the Guanabara UDN, prove Lacerda's projects wrong. Then Geisel shut the radio. Well, what's to be done then? We move at once. Whether Lacerda or whatever crony is in charge consents or not, Guanabara's receive federal aid. Play the armed forces to provide temporary housing for the displaced and bury the dead. See, done at once. The officers and officials nodded and left to get to work, while Ademar sighed, crossed himself, and buried his head in his hands. For he felt a new weight on his shoulders, that of responsibility. Highway is coming along. Let's go ahead. Do some overtime pay. Getting done right under 2 years now. Sumitada couldn't help but smile at the results of the morning. A landslide for Ademar. Ademar, Brazil's new face. Things like that were all the news could speak about, and it could have made him happier. Finally, first bit of good news in a while, he muttered to himself, tuning out the radio and letting the news sink in. Though the gladness welling up in his chest burst for a moment as Chiyoko brought him back to Earth by making her presence known. Why is Ademar got you so excited, Dad? Sumitada thought about everything Ademar done for the Shindo Renmai, the legitimate and the illegitimate, all the deals and support he was willing to offer, but he kept his cards close to his chest. She didn't know. Because Chiyoko, he assisted with Shindo Renmai, something your father's quite passionate about. Hiroshige stepped through the doorway, punctuating the rather awkward silence that began to fill the air. Sumitada looked at her momentarily before suddenly averting his gaze, as if what she'd said had taken him somewhere else. But he had finally decided on what he should tell her. Let's not mention that name. Not in front of her. Chiyoko was left with more questions than answers, but knew it was best not to question her father, least of all while he was this happy. Ademar planted the seeds, but only time would tell if they would grow. I'm going to need to look up what that is, but it's probably not good, but we'll see next time. There goes the NVUVF. Una inspección de perimetro. Vamos! Vamos! Damn, that accent just don't need practice. Capitão Reyes thought to himself. Look at how they go. Just like they picked up their first rifle yesterday. Now Reyes swiveled to his audience. His gaze determined. But you know why you're not joining them right now? Because I know these ain't your first rifles. A bright-eyed, shorter, and tan infantryman retorted back. Actually, I'm not with the army. I'm from La Recoleta in Asu. Shut up! I've been set from the personal orders of the President of Brazil to help Paraguay out of the mud, so don't you ever talk out of turn. The new recruit sheepishly turned his head, but his jumps away from the captain seemed a little exaggerated. Cheeky one. Someone's definitely taught him how to do that. It was definitely not from no capital city. That gave him an idea, though. Having asked everyone for their life stories, places they grew up, and having them pointed out on the map, he had on makeshift desk of disused planks. He noticed something weird. They were all from here, all from the Chaco, all natives to the region they were fighting in. Not only that, they had a certain quickness they did not have until he had been the Brazilian exercito for about a decade. So peculiar. The masters must have had names like Maringo, like Strosno, and all that rubble, all that remained was an unprincipled search for money. Old jackboots, guerrillas, and everyone else whose convictions remained dormant, waiting for some new leader to galvanize them into action. Yet who else was going to do the fighting for them? This was a war-torn country, and when it came to security, there was very little room to pick and choose. Men fallen, you're showing these rookies a drill. We're getting a decent amount of military professionalism, which is nice. The president's office was clean out, save for a few crates that his aides had stacked in a corner. Ademar walked from corner to corner, building a mental map of his new base of operation. There would, of course, need to be a few decorations. Without going to excess, Ademar enjoyed an office that felt a little more lived in, a little less austere. And, of course, be time to correct this all. He had done it. The presidency was his. The Lord Almighty had entrusted him with his task at a historical era for the Brazilian Republic. Outside of his assembled crowds, voices could be heard, a constant, happily rumbling. Ademar would let them simmer a little longer. There would be enough time to share with them the excitement, time enough for projects, for reforms. There would be all the time in the world. On one of the walls, a forgotten nail stood alone. His predecessor hung something there. No matter an opportunity, big or small, should always be taken. President Ademar gently retrieved a portrait of the great president of the old republic, Washington Luis, and hung it on the wall. The time for great things had come. Ademar. Ademar. Let's set up the House of Cards. No man rules alone. Wise courtiers know their importance to the prince's efforts. Wise princes, in turn, know the importance of capable courtiers when allegiance can be guaranteed. President Ademar has been naming ministers, finding advisors, and hiring other key officials. Most of the candidates are alumni from Sao Paulo School of Politics. A friend of Ademar's, oftentimes owing a debt to the president. Sometimes literally. These men got things done in Sao Paulo while keeping the graft to a tolerable level. They will be asked to replicate their efforts in Brasilia, starting with their helping the president's healthcare blitz. Loyal as their men may be, not all of them are friends with one another. Many, no doubt, hold skeletons in their closets. The opposition will be on the lookout for any signs of dissent or corruption within the cabinet. President Ademar is building a house of cards and needs to be careful about his next few choices, lest the Joker bring down the whole edifice. I'm looking at what we can do next. The bigger they are, the harder they fall, so goes the saying. Lucky for Edma, Ademar was quite the giant, so his fall would be magnificent indeed. Entering her office, the vice president noted the presence of Tancredo Neves standing at the table. It was good that he appeared for the meeting. The PTB's support would be indispensable. Tancredo! How good it is to see you. I am so glad that you decided to come. He reciprocated, shaking his hand happily. Now, believe me, Madam Vice President, the honor is all mine, but please, enough with the pleasantries. We have a war to fight. She on agreement, producing a notepad. Very well, I can already say the Rio storm has put Ademar on the wrong foot. His response was sluggish, and it's making him look incompetent. I say if we continue to play this angle up, he'll crumble sooner or later. He nodded in agreement. Precisely. A series of coordinated attacks is what we need. There are plenty of PSG contacts that your father used to work with, still in government. You know, Walter Salas and the like. And once we have him on our side, we can truly start to hammer it in. So that'll be our strategy. Death by 1,000 cuts. Knowing Ademar, he will step out of line eventually. Once he does, we will be there to bring him down. She opened her mouth to continue, but paused upon seeing him look at her almost fondly. Something the matter, sir? He snapped out of it. No, madam. Nothing at all. You just remind me so much of your father. You're proving just as capable as he was. That was always his worst nightmare. Now as for the press angle. Oh boy. Smoky, tardy, and bitter. This was precisely how Filinto Mueller disliked his coffee. He was never a fan of it because it always left a bad taste in his mouth, but he knew he needed it so he can get through every morning. Putting down the cup on the saucer, Filinto remembered how coffee shaped Brazil for the last 200 years. Not too long ago, the coffee barons of Sao Paulo dominated the country's politics, and he's one of the soldiers to fight against them throughout the bloody 20s. Today, a child of those same barons, he thought against stands in Brazil as the nation's president. Filinto couldn't help but feel a little resentful about this. Was Brazil really on its way to returning to those dreadful days? The ones he fought so hard to destroy? At the same time, was Vargas himself who helped kickstart Ademar's political career by naming him Sao Paulo inventor. By his own recommendation, no less, so perhaps there was some use in him. The PSP are just a bunch of opportunists climbing the ladder to get their pocket stuff with their leader's money. Without someone to put them in line, Ademar will be thrown out of his new throne once Edna and the opposition openly inevitable impeachment inquiry. More than that, they need a leader outside of Sao Paulo. How can a party that rules only one state serve an entire country? Filinto hated this, but perhaps he could help them, or so he thought to himself. He was already increasingly being smeared as the Brazilian Himmler by his fellow party men, so moving to a new party may be the best choice to protect his beloved Mato Grosso and the legacy of Estado Novo. It was decided. Taking a final sip from his coffee, Filinto reached for the phone beside him. To the coffee fields. Filinto Mueller has switched parties from the PSC to the PSP, changing the politics of Mato Grosso forever. Interesting. We got a couple things to look at right off the bat, don't we? Staff meetings were always some of Ademar's favorite obligations, meeting his team, managing assignments, verifying who was reliable and who was expendable. The Bull found himself at the center of a web of associates and partnerships of dizzying complexity, all necessary to keep his back secure, and Ademar appreciated the challenge of dealing with people predictable in their whims and schemes. Better that than whatever wretch the Lord put up high could throw into his plans. But Day's various meetings sought to organize the spoils of the campaign. Various ministries had to be assigned. Some high-ranking Ademars like Laudo and Natel had failed to be elected, and thus giving them a ministerial portfolio would be the best use of their abilities, and the best guarantor of their loyalty. Also on the agenda was the discussion about Nalat. A clique of Ademar's advisors, the scorn Natel of their center, saw the Labor Vice President as one of the greatest threats of a new Ademar administration. The President couldn't disagree with their analysis. Had Quadros not been a constant thorn in the problem of the old law administration, after all? If not managed cautiously, Edna Lot would prove to be a dangerous fifth column within the government. Finally, the matter of healthcare. Ademar presented his plan for healthcare reform. The assembled men cheered on the ambitious project. Many no doubt saw it as an essential step to guarantee the health and progress of Brazil. Others likely thought of it as a propaganda coup of a century. The president could not smile at his ambitious associates' lack of vision in the particular area. The reform would have achieved both objectives. Now it's time to get this show on the road. President Ademar de Barros had barely settled in the presidential office, and now the burden of Lot had already presented themselves on his desk. Regardless of his opinions on Lot, Ademar de Barros could only sigh after learning about his policy on Guyana. Even on points he thought were sound, putting that idiot Nolasco in charge had completely scuppered them. He flickered through the report, looking through the sections already highlighted by the secretary. The Organization of American States has watched the situation in Guyana occurring with concern. We already received concerns from representatives of PSG, but this recent unrest has proven the need for quick action. Effectively, the OS will extend an invitation to the Brazilian government to collaborate in establishing a Guinea's independence referendum. If you decline, you will be considered a pariah in South America. That was the unstated part. We look forward to the newly elected president's response and hope for a fruitful working relationship. There's no way Ademar could take the on the OAS. Regardless of his own feelings and that of the party, he simply did not have enough political capital to go against the American-backed organization at such an early stage of his government. With the alternatives ruled out, he began riding back with the only sponsor left to him. We look forward to helping determine the future of Guyana. What a note to leave things on, huh? And I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for watching, gang. Like, dislike if you didn't, leave me comments, feedback, down, comments below. I think you all know the drill by now. I will see you all next time. Thanks for watching, and bye-bye.